George IV was born in 1762, the eldest son of King George III. From the moment of his birth, he was destined to inherit the throne of Great Britain. But as he grew older, it became clear that he was very different from the image of a disciplined and responsible monarch. As a young man, George was charming and intelligent, but he also developed a reputation for extravagance. He loved expensive clothes, fine food, and glamorous parties. He surrounded himself with artists, musicians, and fashionable society figures. While this made him popular in elite circles, it also created serious problems. His spending habits left him buried in debt, and his reputation for indulgence alarmed his father, King George III. In 1785, George secretly married Maria Fitzherbert, a Catholic widow. This was illegal under British law. The Royal Marriages Act required the king's permission for any marriage, and it also forbade heirs to the throne from marrying Catholics. George ignored the rules, and though the marriage was never legally recognized, it became one of the great scandals of his life. 10 years later, Parliament pressured George to marry for political reasons. They promised to pay his debts if he agreed to a suitable marriage. In 1795, he reluctantly married Princess Caroline of Brunswick. The marriage was a disaster from the start. George disliked Caroline at first sight, and she found him arrogant and unpleasant. The two lived together only briefly before separating. Despite their mutual hatred, they had one daughter, Princess Charlotte. She was the only legitimate grandchild of King George III, and the public adored her. Many saw her as the future hope of the monarchy. But in 1817, tragedy struck. Princess Charlotte died during childbirth, leaving the nation in mourning. Her death created a crisis of succession and left George and Caroline more bitterly divided than ever. In 1811, George's father, King George III, became permanently unable to rule due to mental illness. George was appointed as Prince Regent, taking control of the government in his father's place. This period became known as the Regency era. It was a time of cultural brilliance. George supported art, fashion, architecture, and literature. He commissioned the building of Regent Street and Regent's Park, and he transformed Brighton with the extravagant Royal Pavilion. Writers such as Jane Austen and Lord Byron flourished during this time. But while culture thrived, George's personal reputation suffered. He was seen as wasteful, selfish, and disconnected from ordinary people. He drank heavily, gained weight, and lived in luxury while much of Britain struggled with poverty and war. In 1820, George finally became king. By then, he was in poor health and deeply unpopular. His greatest scandal as king involved his estranged wife, Caroline. By law, she became queen consort, but George despised her so much that he refused to let her attend his coronation. When Caroline tried to enter Westminster Abbey, she was turned away at the door. Crowds watching the event sided with her, booing the king and cheering for the queen. It was one of the most humiliating moments in George's reign. During his 10 years on the throne, George supported a few important measures, including Catholic emancipation in 1829, which allowed Catholics more rights in Britain. But his reign was overshadowed by his personal flaws. Many politicians tried to limit his influence, preferring to keep him away from daily government decisions. By the late 1820s, George's health collapsed. Years of overeating and drinking left him unable to walk without difficulty. He spent his final years isolated and in pain. In 1830, he died at Windsor Castle at the age of 67. Because his daughter Charlotte had died, George left no direct heir. The crown passed to his brother, who became William IV. History has not remembered George IV kindly. He is often described as vain, extravagant, and irresponsible. Yet his reign also gave Britain great cultural achievements, from elegant architecture to a flourishing of the arts. He remains one of the most controversial monarchs in British history, a man who had every advantage at birth, but who never won the love of his people.